Welcome to Have You Read It, the channel where we bring books to life, one summary at a time. Today we're diving deep into Peter Zeihan's The End of the World is Just the Beginning, mapping the collapse of globalization. Buckle up, because this isn't your typical rosy outlook read. Zeihan, a geopolitical strategist, argues that we're not just facing a few economic hiccups, but a fundamental unraveling of the global order as we know it. To understand Zeihan's predictions, we have to start with his core concepts: geopolitics and demography. He emphasizes that where you are dictates who you are, and that population structures shape a nation's trajectory. A country's geography, its rivers, coastlines, arable land, and natural resources, shapes its economic potential and its vulnerability to outside forces. Demography, the study of population, reveals how age distribution influences everything from consumption patterns to workforce availability. Zeihan contends that the last 75 years have been an anomaly. The American-led order, established after World War II, created an era of unprecedented peace and prosperity by providing global security and fostering free trade. This system allowed countries to specialize, industrialize, and develop, leading to a surge in global population and wealth. However, this system is now collapsing due to two major factors: the withdrawal of American security guarantees and a global demographic crisis. Now let's go back to the start. Humanity started as wanderers, driven by hunger, with muscle as their only power source. The sedentary farming revolution changed everything, as humans began using their own waste to improve the growth of crops. Sedentary agriculture brought in some of humanity's first technological advancements and introduced humans to the first rule of geopolitics: location matters. To support staying in one place, we needed a climate that lacked seasonality, so crops could be grown year-round, consistent water flows, and natural barriers. The only places that meet these criteria are rivers that flow through low-latitude and low-altitude deserts. Rivers provided transport, which separated the early agriculturalists from everyone else. Rivers also solved digestion issues through water wheels, which powered the milling process. History sped up again with the wind revolution. The shift from water power to wind power favored different sorts of lands: big internal frontiers with easy distribution and crunchy external barriers. With cities popping up anywhere the rain fell and the wind blew, war became more common, with food supplies linked to specific pieces of infrastructure. The world's dominant political unit evolved from sequestered agricultural communities to globe-spanning, trade-based deep-water empires. New ships could sail out of sight of land for months, limiting the need to stop for supplies, while profits surged and requirements for having large, high-quality chunks of arable land diminished. Yet humanity retained many of the limitations that had hobbled advancement since the beginning. That is, until the harnessing of fossil fuels upended it all with steam-powered ships and the light and manufacturing time afforded by electricity. Now, the biggest restriction was no longer water or wind, but instead capital. For many, the economic stress translated into political stress. However, while Britain and Germany and Japan and China and France and Russia were busy destroying each other's wind and water and industrial-related infrastructure, the Americans were using the war to massively apply the technologies of water and wind and deep water and industrial capacity to their territory. Zeihan calls the U.S. an accidental superpower because of its uniquely favorable geography. The Mississippi River system, combined with fertile soil, made it an agricultural powerhouse. Its extensive coastline and access to two oceans facilitated trade. Its insulated position between Canada and Mexico minimized security threats. Finally, its geography is combined with an open immigration system that kept labor costs low. Then came World War II. Rather than establish a world of colonies, the Americans offered their wartime allies a deal in what would become known as the Bretton Woods system. The Americans would use their navy to protect the commerce of all, open their market to Allied exports, and extend a strategic blanket over all. With military competition banned among the Bretton Woods participants, The countries could focus on infrastructure, education, and development. However, the fall of the Berlin Wall changed everything. Now that the war was over, why expect the Americans to continue paying for an alliance? It would be like continuing to make mortgage payments even after your house is paid for. Different people behave differently, spawning some demographic differences based on age. Mass urbanization came in diverse ways at distinct rates in various eras. The generally accepted first step of the Industrial Revolution occurred in the sleepy world of textiles. The new concentrations of people generated their own challenges, necessitating demand for and innovations in the fields of medicine, sanitation, transport, and logistics. But by far the most dramatic impact has been on birth rates. When much of the economic rationale for having children evaporates, people do what comes naturally. They have fewer of them. And yet, populations grew throughout the industrialization process. Part of the reason for this is obvious. Vastly improved distribution systems, combined with the development and application of synthetic pesticides and herbicides, and especially fertilizers, generated more and more reliable food production, removing the famine cap. The jump to watermilling finally happened in the last couple of centuries BCE and was popularized thanks to the Greeks and Romans. The grinding windmill took several additional centuries, not becoming common until the 7th and 8th centuries CE. But now history sped up. This widespread spamming of new cultures had a rapid-fire series of consequences. First, civilized life may have become far more common as the straitjacket terms for the geographies of success loosened somewhat, but life became far less secure. But it isn't like this all happened all at once. The shift from the farm to the town took time. The growing of London into the world's largest, richest, most educated city took time. The transformation of cultural and economic norms of huge families flush with backup children, where the average adult died in his 30s, to tiny families where kids were considered obnoxiously loud and annoyingly mobile safety hazards, and where 60-year-olds were common, took time. The tripling of the British home population took time. For the British, the entire transformation took 7 generations. Nothing about the industrial technologies the British developed was destined to remain purely British. But because the German population, unlike the British population before it, could follow a path blazed by others, the entire process from tip to tail occurred in just 4 generations. As the 1700s rolled on, the British began importing cotton and started building a larger-scale cottage-cum-guild industry for textiles. As the years ticked by and profits from cotton processing and textile manufacture grew, workers and bosses developed newfangled ways of increasing productivity, complexity, and durability. Despite the ever-building technological reach and depth of the Deepwater era, humanity retained many of the limitations that had hobbled advancement since the beginning. As recently as 1700, all energy used by humans fell into one of 3 buckets: muscle, water, or wind. The previous 13 millennia can be summed up as humanity's effort to capture the 3 forces in larger volumes and with better efficiencies. But in the end, if the wind didn't blow, or the water didn't flow, or the meat wasn't fed and rested, nothing was going to get done. The author points out the key ways that the rise of the women's rights movement changed society. Women were no longer tied to a specific physical location. Mass female education was enabled. Women could earn their own income. Even those who wanted large families discovered that careers tend to crowd out other items on their to-do lists. Combine such advances with the early women's rights movements, and the political and economic stars of the fairer sex began their long rise. Also affecting this change was government involvement. By enforcing global security, shattering the empires, opening the world to trade, and enabling the spread of the agricultural technologies of the Industrial Revolution, the Americans inadvertently introduced the world to global agriculture. The world's demographic structure passed the point of no return 20 to 40 years ago. The 2020s are the decade when it all breaks apart. For countries as varied as China, Russia, Japan, Germany, Italy, South Korea, Ukraine, Canada, Malaysia, Taiwan, Romania, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Austria, the question isn't when these countries will age into demographic obsolescence. Russia is probably one of the best-case scenarios for much of the industrialized world. Russia has ample capacity at home to feed and fuel itself, in addition to sufficient nuclear weapons to make any would-be aggressor stop and think a few dozen times before launching an assault. However, a possible exception is Japan, who read the writing on the wall in the 1980s. They saw how their American security guarantor resented product dumping and started a multi-decade effort to instead manufacture goods within their target markets. It is exceedingly unlikely that Japan's path is replicable. After all, the Japanese experience of 1980 to 2019 is in many ways unique. Corporate Japan faced no serious security threats abroad. Japan's transformation occurred when its firms had access to global consumer markets. COVID-19 robbed us of something we needed more than anything else to prepare for the coming demographic devastation. It robbed us of the one thing no one on Earth can make more of: time. We learned that vaccination was the only reasonable way to go. By the time we reached October 2021, we learned that the immune response generated from suffering through COVID's then-dominant Delta variant varied wildly in the protection it generated. But more important, for some such protection lasted only a handful of weeks. The key word in that last sentence, of course, is most. Precious few countries have managed a high degree of development while simultaneously avoiding a collapse in birth rates. The precious few countries that have included the United States, France, Argentina, Sweden, and New Zealand. The discussion now transitions to ways to think about and map the new world after everything has changed. Consider snow removal as an analog. Without gasoline-powered snow-clearing gear, a house at 7,500 feet not only would have never been built, it could not even theoretically be maintained. If global flows of products and services and energy and foodstuffs are interrupted, the population and political and economic maps will change. In a post-globalized world, large, diversely resource-rich countries like the United States can shuffle products around internally to make everything work. Deglobalization doesn't simply mean a darker, poorer world, it means something far worse, an unraveling. Venezuela and Zimbabwe are examples of what this might look like. Everything we know about human civilization is based on the simple idea of organization. Once a government lays down some basic ground rules like don't kill your neighbor, people start doing what people do. Raising families, growing food, hammering out widgets. People start trading, so that the farmer doesn't also have to make flour and the blacksmith doesn't have to grow his own food. This specialization makes us more productive in our chosen fields, be it farming or milling or blacksmithing. With the world now the harvesting ground, all cities could increase in size. For instance, to the globalized world as it relates to aluminum, the author notes that in a world where there are aluminum shortages everywhere, the question becomes, what is required? It is helpful to have a framework for comparing systems with some base in reality. From 1700 to now, societies and economics grew in ways that required energy to move people and things, money to get products and things, security to enable specialization in trade, and access to food in a market for reliable, affordable food to eat. The author uses his framework of a global system and applies to a look to what is over the horizon. One must look first to the most interconnected system of globalization, transport, as it is most affected by those various factors. The first piece to fall in transport is deep water technology, new global supply chains that are long become vulnerable. Ports also require infrastructure, energy, and security. We are moving towards what's referred to as de-civilization. As a result of the changing landscape, it is now time to ask important questions. What constitutes important, essential production? Should we depend upon an outside agency? A simple analysis of how the U.S. and its allies in North America will change requires a simple shift in the world. To discuss the effects of the financial and climate issues, the discussion turns to what could be called a food cluster analysis. The most important thing is to have a place for all of this. This results in local food production, with small yields per acre. Consider one product on its own: wheat. It has been such a key part of history and growth of societies, and it is set to be no more. This is not only a problem, as there is little to no reliable harvest in future. Thus, the end, as they say, is at hand. Looking towards, with smaller farms we can go from 70% to just above 50%, or higher. That gives us to a possible point that, well, things will keep grinding for years on. So just how much of the world's output can we expect is one of the bigger questions. What to do? What to do? These were the choices to put to future economic and technological realities. Unfortunately and inevitably, there is so much to discuss that is about to be. The world is so big. If there are certainties, we may be able to reach beyond a point of no return. For what remains of the book, we have to deal with how we adapt. With that said, we need 3 things. Where did our food supply come from? What does our power supply look like? And what could it all bring? All these factors together make all of this are quite difficult because of so many points about the world to be the big part to look at in this project. What we all had was a lot of land to take and to handle the problem of agriculture. While I can't put you right in that land, the next few steps help you in the long run. Here, and in several thousand years, we will meet each other to be in a position for anything to come to bear. It's not so much something that will simply create our own demise. Rather, it is just going with it. These challenges we're addressing now are not simple in our own hands. Some steps require years to build new plans. While we might all be able to survive if our own thoughts and planning can be done, there's only so much to do. By its nature, all that this brings might not ever know. The key takeaway from the book is that the convergence of geopolitical instability and demographic decline is creating a perfect storm that will reshape the world order. Some easy-to-remember heuristics from the book include: geography matters. Where you are dictates what you are. Demographics are destiny. Population structures shape a nation's trajectory. The American-led order is ending. The globalized world we know is unsustainable. Localization is key. Self-sufficiency will be paramount in the new world order. Adaptability is survival. Those who can adjust to the changing landscape will thrive. Thanks for watching. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you never miss our next book dive.